Welcome to r/AskReddit. Today's story. What's something that you've done while horny and you regret it? Here's our first comment. My cousin's girlfriend from a few towns over texted and said her parents were out to watch a film, so he knew he had 3 hours, minus the time it took to get there, to spend some quality time with her. He got there in just under 90 minutes. We were all quite impressed that he'd driven that far. Then my brother did the math and said, wait, you were averaging like 90 miles per hour. Yeah, and you were only on the motorway for about half the journey? Yep. So, you were doing like 120 on the motorway? Yup. So, what would you have done if you'd seen blue flashing lights behind you? Not stopped. It wasn't anywhere near 1200 miles, but goddamn, he just put his foot down and didn't lift it off the pedal until he was balls deep. Here's our next comment. Asked my wife if she was interested in us getting a butt plug. She gave me a confused look and said, if you're into it, sure. And then after purchasing realized that we both had different ideas on who it was for. Here's our next comment. Almost got a bar of soap stuck in my booty hole. I was in the shower and thought I bet sticking soap in my rear would feel good. So, I did it assuming it would be easy to squeeze out, because soap is slippery. Boy was I wrong. After a few minimums of panicking and pushing I managed to get it out. Like imagine asking your parents to take you to the hospital because you got a bar of soap stuck in your ass. Here's our next comment. Deep heat. Let me tell you now, ladies and gents, it is not a warming sensation on your most sensitive parts. Post application I immediately ran to the bathroom with the remnants of my smoldering member in my hand. Was telling my GF at the time on the telephone later that day, my dad must have overheard. Next time I was hosting a few friends, he walked into my room and said something along the lines of, backquote fellas, you be careful on your application of deep heat, and walked out. Here's our next comment. When I was a stupid teen, I put an ice cube in my vagina. My reasoning was that if hot water felt nice, maybe something extremely cold would. It did not feel nice. It was horrible, and I couldn't remove it. 3 minutes of agony. Here's our next comment. Not my story, but my old bandmates. So here we have a horny teenager. He was maybe 16 at the time and he just came out as gay this year. He had been experimenting, and we were brothers, so he would always overshare these experiences. Well, one day he tells me he had made a huge mistake. He really wanted to know what something bigger than his fingers felt like, and he had heard of people using cucumbers as dildos. That said, he only had pickles at home. He did not, however, account for the vinegar and spices. I don't know the pain he felt, but I do know he regretted it immediately. Here's our next comment. Using shampoo to jerk off. Worst piss pain ever. Here's our next comment. Meticulously cleaned my entire parents' house while I still lived with them. Took hours to shave every from hair off of my body and lost weight to fit into an overpriced lingerie set. This guy I was talking to said he was going to come over and rock my world. Literally the day of, as I was sitting there on my bed massaging my legs with lotion to stop the burning from using Nair, he calls me, drunk as frick, to gloat about how he met this girl that let him put it in her butt. They were still going at it while he was talking to me on speakerphone. I just hung up and cried from frustration. They dated for 3 weeks before they broke up because he stole money from her, so I guess I dodged a bullet. So there's that, at least Mayo. I was 17 and stupid. Here's our next comment. In my early teen years, I accidentally made my clit burn using Vicks Vapo Rub that was supposed to give it a tingling sensation. I watched way too much BDSM and got ideas. I was in immense pain and was lying spread out under cold water to try and make it stop, and I couldn't tell my extremely religious parents, or they were all freaked out. Here's our next comment. I was edging for 3 hours. Had the idea that tying my wanker with a shoelace would hold everything together for at least another hour. It held on for 2 and nutted so hard I felt some pain on my abdomen and legs. Took me an extra hour to sleep, and the next day my whole body was fatigued. Thought I twisted my testicle or some stuff. I recovered after around 48 hours. Here's our next comment. I once got a little too enthusiastic with an eggplant emoji shaped vibrator and nearly got it stuck inside my back door cavity. I really didn't want to explain to anyone why I needed to go to a hospital, so I actually managed to get it out myself, but only because I already knew that if I panicked, I'd make things worse. Don't worry, I would have gone to the ER if it went any further than my fingers could reach. Here's a bit of advice for all: if you put anything up your butt, please buy it from a sex store that has instructions and ways to prevent having something get stuck. Look up safe ways to enjoy having things up your butt, because you could really hurt yourself. You could avoid a very embarrassing and expensive trip to hospital. Here's our next comment. Her name was Annie, and she stalked me for 2 years after that. Here's our next comment. Asked an escort to come over to my house at 2 AM instead of jerking off, like for free. Well, she and 3 other guys ended up kicking in my door and robbing me and my house 0/10 never again. Here's our next comment. Got jizz in my ear, ended up with an ear infection. Try explaining to a doctor what the foreign liquid is in your ear when you're 15. Here's our next comment. Hooked up with a coworker who looked like Mr. Bean. She was a girl. Here's our next comment. Banged my landlord. He lived in the same building on the floor below me with his ex-fiancée. It was actually pretty fun until he started monitoring when I was home and knocking on my door when he knew I was home alone. Had to put an end to that real quick. My only regret is not getting a discount on rent. Here's our next comment. I was 22 and left the bar with a 42-year-old cougar. If that was the bulk of the detail, then no big deal. But when we got back to her place, her maybe 15-year-old son was playing Call of Duty in the living room. Tiny apartment. I probably should have ducked out at that point. About 15 minutes later he went to bed, and about 30 minutes later his mom and I were banging on the couch. We did all sorts of stuff, and I'm still ashamed. The next morning, we went out to her car, and her battery was dead. She left her headlights on. Yeah, she drove us drunk the night before. She was going to be my ride home. At this point I'm excruciatingly hungover, and my phone has the thinnest little red line of battery life. I text a buddy telling him where I am, and to please come pick me up with my car. Phone dies. I'm looking at this lady, wondering WTF I'm doing with my life. And I guess the best idea we had was get a margarita at this crappy Americanized Mexican food joint. It was 10 AM. I sat there in the outside dining area with this woman, smoking a cigarette and staring into my slushy shame, wondering how many times her poor kid has seen her mom bring home some random college dude. We finished the margaritas and left the restaurant. As I walked out into the parking lot, now warming in the late morning sun, hangover getting ready to destroy me, I see my car pull into the lot with my buddy behind the wheel, with a crap-eating grin on his face. I hugged the lady, thanked her, with no exchange of numbers, and ducked like I should have 9 hours earlier. Here's our next comment. Friend passed away due to a trucking accident, went on Tinder due to desired needs after a divorce, took a chick's virginity, and later found out she was the friend's sister visiting for the few weeks till they figured out the funeral. Never told anyone about this. Here's our next comment. Sex with my ex, the same day I moved out. We had broken up earlier, but it took a couple of months before I managed to find a place to move all my stuff. Afterwards, I just laid there and hugged her hard, didn't want to let go. Just laid there in a cuddly mess for half an hour, covered in sweat and other bodily fluids, but most of all, tears. I don't know why the frick I did that to myself. It was supposed to make us both feel better and relieve stress, but it was just torture. I should have just left much earlier, preferably when she wasn't at home. Here's our next comment. Using the twin percussion handheld back massager on my wanker. Not going to lie, it felt really freaking good. But it left a lingering tender feeling that had me walking funny for a bit. Happened when I was but a wee mid-teen. Here's our next comment. Enthusiastically went home with a guy who said he had a dog. He had 2. Found out from a friend the next time he had just gotten out of jail for homicide. Here's our next comment. Not sure if this counts, but I was about to do it with a guy and discovered we had no condoms. Decided to drive across town to his place since he had some. Got in a minor, not our fault, car accident on the way there. Ended up at the cop station to report it instead of banging. Here's our next comment. Banged a couch when I was like 13. I was at a sleepover at my mom's boss's house. I was friends with her kids and it was like 2 AM and my wanker was saying it's go time. I heard Shane Dawson or some other YouTuber at the time say they banged a couch, so I thought I'd give it a go. I cut my wanker on the cushion zipper and I think my couch banging days are over. Here's our next comment. Jacked off in the shower while laying down in the tub. Shower water raining down from above. It was very nice and ended nicely. Later that day, I went to take a dump. Poo wouldn't come out, and I felt an odd tugging sensation between my butt cheeks. Thought I was dying, and started freaking out while I tried to pinch my poop off to investigate. Turns out my jizz had found its way into my rear cheeks while laying down in the tub, mingled with all my rear hair, and solidified into a gelatinous plaster. Upon pooping, the hair was so mashed together that my cheeks couldn't separate for the poo to emerge. Felt like that Play-Doh hair salon toy. I ended up having such a massacre of cum on my rear and hands that I had to get back in the shower just to clean off. Here's our next comment. Wrote a letter to my supervisor asking him out about a month after I left the job and was ghosted. It's been about 8 months and now I'm going back to that forsaken place because adulting is hard and money is important. Well, this is going to be awkward. I just wanted someone to hold my hand, occasionally screw and watch Gladiator on a first date. What guy doesn't like Gladiator? I did ask him if he would like to take my dumb dog for a walk. The height difference wouldn't have worked anyway. Here's our next comment. I came onto my best female friend. We'd flirted back and forth for years, so I didn't see the harm in asking. I was super blunt about my interest and she laughed the whole thing off. We talked less and less after that, and now I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. I regret freaking up the best friendship I've ever had to try to get my wanker wet. It was so freaking stupid of me. Here's our next comment. 5 years ago, boss recruited someone new and introduced them via a WhatsApp group. Before we met them, new recruit and I started chatting in WhatsApp before we ever met, and I took it too far too fast. Went to meet him that night. I was deeply not attracted to him, and his home was horror story dirty and cluttered. I accepted his weak offer for alcohol and got drunk really fast to avoid facing reality. I felt too bad for him to leave, but I knew the alcohol would help me help him. The sex ended up being one of the best I ever had to date, but he is such a gross person, hygiene, and personality. I regret everything about the way it happened. Same year, swimming in self-hatred. I also banged the boss of that job. 2 regrets for the price of 1. You're welcome. Thanks for watching.